वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की जय। श्रीमद् सद्गुरु सरकार की जय। प्रथमं सद्गुरुं वन्दे श्रीकृष्णं तदनन्तरं गुरुः पापात्मनां त्राता श्रीकृष्णस्त्वमलात्मनाम्। वर्हापीडं नटवरवपुः कर्णयोः कर्णिकारम् बिभ्रद्वासः कनककपिशं वैजयन्तीं च मालाम्। रन्ध्रान् वेणोरधरसुधया पूरयन् गोपवृन्दैर्वृन्दारण्यं स्वपदरमणं प्राविशद् गीतकीर्तिः। नमः कमलनाभाय नमः कमलमालिने नमः कमलपादाय नमस्ते कमलेक्षण यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तग्वंहा देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। Eternally seeking souls, please turn to page 168 in the new book, and we will continue from where we left off yesterday. We will begin singing the refrain, Sadhana Karu, Sadhana Karu, Sadhana Karu, Pyare. After that, it will be the 6th verse from the bottom, which starts with, Hari mein, Guru mein hi rahe nit. साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं प्यारे। Chorus mic.
साधना करूं प्यारे, साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे, साधना करूं प्यारे।
साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं प्यारे।
साधना करूं
हरि में गुरु में ही रहे नित, हरि में गुरु में ही रहे नित, रक्त तव मन प्यारे। हरि में गुरु में ही रहे नित, रक्त तव मन प्यारे, रक्त तव मन प्यारे।
हरि में गुरु में ही रहे नित, रक्त तव मन प्यारे। हरि में गुरु में ही रहे नित, रक्त तव मन प्यारे, रक्त तव मन प्यारे।
साधना करो, साधना करो, साधना करो प्यारे, साधना करो, साधना करो, साधना करो प्यारे, साधना करो प्यारे।
साधना करो, साधना करो, साधना करो प्यारे, साधना करो, साधना करो, साधना करो प्यारे, साधना करो प्यारे।
The Guru says to the disciple, to the seeker, keep your mind constantly absorbed in God and Guru, in Hari Guru. Jagadguru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj is explaining the importance of doing devotion in daily life, and he is disclosing the exact method of practicing devotion. So nothing is left to the imagination of the seeker, and everything is being specified by the divine Guru, the divine teacher. As we work in the world, we must keep our mind attached to God and Guru. We hear this from scriptures and saints. But then we ask a question, and that is, how can I do both things at once? I can't do it. However, we are already doing this. We are always doing, so often doing two things at once. An example would be someone driving a car. A woman is driving a car, but she's carrying on a conversation with her fellow passengers. Another example is that of a student who is studying but listening to music at the same time. Many children say these days that they can't study unless they are listening to music. So they're doing two things at once. Isn't that incredible? Studying for an exam and listening to music. Driving a car and you have to take so many precautions and yet carrying on a conversation. A mother is cooking a meal for her family, and yet she's doing so many other things at the same time. We are multitasking all the time. So we should not think that it's impossible for me to think of God and Guru all the time while I do my work in the world. Of course, there is a difference. The difference is that when we are multitasking, or at least we're doing two things at once, both those actions are worldly actions, right? Driving a car and carrying on a conversation. The conversation is not a scriptural debate. It's not about God and Guru. It's about worldly things. Listening to music and studying, both are worldly actions. But here we are being asked, we're being told, advised, to think of God, having the mind constantly engaged in the thoughts of God, and Guru. Both are pure personalities. And at the same time, engaging the body in doing works of the world. Works of the world cannot stop. They must not stop. They don't have to be stopped. And that's the beauty of devotion. You can do two things at once. The mind is thinking of Hari and Guru, and the body is performing actions, fulfilling chores and duties and responsibilities. Guru Vashishtha tells Bhagwan Shri Ram, Karta bahir kartantar loke vihara raghav. This is from Yoga Vashishtha. He says, O Ram, remain a non-doer internally. In other words, don't perform any action internally. Perform those actions only externally, only physically. Perform actions only physically, but keep your mind inactive. In other words, don't be a doer on the inside, be a doer on the outside. Why? Because our actions bind us, they tie us up to this world. Karmana badhyate jantuhu. Karm jeev ko bandh dete hain. If we are performing good actions, we are tied up by those good actions, and the end result would be going to Swargalok. Good actions, I mean those Vedic actions, performing the duties, whether you're Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, performing your duties, those virtuous actions, punya karma, they bind the individual. If we are performing sinful actions, they will also bind us. Certainly they will bind us, and they will send us down to Naraklok. If we are performing a mixture of both good and bad actions, and that's what we usually do, then we are bound to come back to this earth. Every action bears consequence. Every action bears fruit. Avashyameva bhoktavyam kritam karma shubha shubham. प्रत्येक कर्म का, शुभ कर्म का, अशुभ कर्म का फल अवश्य मिलेगा. Every action, good or bad, will bear fruit. That fruit may be given to us, the consequence of our action may be given to us the same day, or the next week, or next year, or next lifetime, or 20 lifetimes from now. But every action will bear fruit. And manasa kritamit. It's very important for us to understand this point. And that is that God considers an action to be an action only if it is performed by the mind. Man se kiya hua karm hi, usko hi Bhagwan karm mante hain. So only when we perform that action from our mind, that God considers it to be an action. Arjun was fighting a battle. He was striking arrows, he was killing so many people on the battlefield. But he was not performing that action of killing from the mind. His mind was only on Sri Krishna. In his mind, he is thinking, Krishna, 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 Krishna. He's loving Sri Krishna internally, so his mind is not performing works of the world, but externally he is fighting a battle. And as a warrior, he must shoot arrows at the enemy. So he's killing so many people. But what does Sri Krishna write in Arjun's file? He writes, Arjun did not perform any action whatsoever. He only did bhakti. He only practiced devotion. But I saw him, the whole world saw him, shooting arrows at the enemy. Yes, you saw him, but I saw what he did on the inside. His mind was only attached to me. So God considers only the action performed by the mind to be an action. What does this mean for us? It means that sometimes when we think, he doesn't know what I'm thinking of him, I'm respecting him. I'm saying, Aiye, please come in, please grace my house. I'm telling him all this, giving him, I'm just pulling the wool over his eyes. He thinks that I really respect him. he thinks that I really want him in my house, but actually I don't like him at all. I hate him, in fact. So we think at times that we are being very clever, that the other person doesn't know what we are thinking. We all do this. We all do it. The other person doesn't know what I'm thinking, how foolish he is, how I have fooled him. And God is laughing. Shri Krishna is laughing that you think you can fool me? I have taken note of your thoughts, and you have thought very negative thoughts, very insulting thoughts about this fellow, and I'm not pleased with this. Antah pravishta shasta jananam Veda. The Vedas say that as soon as we think of something, God has taken note of it. As soon as we entertain a thought, God has already taken note. It's considered an action. It's a done deal. It's an action. And we are thinking, I was just thinking about it, I didn't do anything. But we have performed an action. Even people in the world who are not all-knowing, we are not all-knowing. We just go by the external aspects of a person. We judge a person by his or her external actions. But even then, we can often tell someone's intention. A man in the middle of the night, a thief, he's checking out this great big lock outside an establishment, outside an office. He wants to break in, so he's checking out this lock. And a policeman who's patrolling the area comes and says, "What are you doing, my good fellow?" "Oh, I was just looking. You're flashing a flat light. You have a flashlight and you're flashing light on this lock. So what is your intention?" "Oh, sir, I'm shopping around for a good, secure lock, and I was just passing by, and I thought, let me see what the name of this lock is so I can get similar one for my house." Right. That's what you were doing. Come along with me. Where? To jail. I'm going to put you in the holding cell. I'm booking you. But why? I didn't do anything. You didn't do it. I didn't see you doing anything, but I know you have the intention to steal, so I'm taking you in. Another example. A woman is driving on the highway, and she is within the speed limit. She's following all the rules of the road, and suddenly she sees a man just coming quickly, running in front of her car. She's horrified. She slams the brakes. But unfortunately, it's not enough. She doesn't have enough time because he took her by surprise. She's frantic. She's distraught. She calls 911. The policeman comes. And then the case goes to court. And both the judge as well as the jury, members of the jury, are convinced that this woman had no intention to kill that man. Why? She doesn't even know that man. She didn't know who he was. She didn't have the intention to harm him. She was following the rules of traffic. She was not speeding. She was not at fault. The man came out of nowhere, and she tried to save him. She tried to slam her brakes, but it was not enough time. There wasn't enough time. So she goes off. She goes free. She's not held responsible. Reason is because she did not have the intention to kill that man. So even in the world where we are not all-knowing, yet we can tell someone's intention. Then what to speak of God? Yah sarvagya, he is sarvagya. Sarva meaning all. Gya meaning knowing. He's all-knowing. He's omniscient. So he knows our intention, and he takes note of our thoughts, and those thoughts are considered our actions. Why should we know this? Why should we pay attention right here? Why should we be sitting straight? Why should you be sitting straight with your eyes open and not closed? Because this is a very important point for all of us to understand. Because we think to ourselves, no one knows what I'm thinking. No one knows what I'm thinking. And at the same time, we say, God is all-knowing, and God is always with me. So these two statements don't match, do they? That means we are not really sure if God is all-knowing, or we forget that God is all-knowing. But should we forget? We're harming ourselves tremendously by thinking, no one knows what I'm thinking. I'm thinking this in private. Nobody knows my mind. And yet God is inside of us. God lives in our heart, in our subtle heart. That is where the soul lives. Jivatma lives in the subtle heart. Sukshma hriday. Hridi Hyesha Atma. Chandogya Upanishad. And the Supreme Soul lives within the individual soul. So He's living within our heart. He's taking note of each and every thought, which He calls actions. Karma. Which the world calls only thought. It's only a thought. You only thought about it. God says, I've considered it to be an action, and I will give you the reward or punishment for that action. So when we are performing our various duties in the world, we should keep God and Guru in mind, because they are the only ones who keep the mind pure. Why? Because they are the pure personalities. Both of them are pure personalities. They are beyond even Sattva Gun. The three modes of Maya, Tamo Gun, Rajo Gun, Sattva Gun. People say Sattva Gun is, I want to be Sattva Guni. But God and Guru are beyond Sattva Gun. They are divine. They are pure. And keeping them in mind will purify our mind. We must always keep our mission in mind. What is my mission in life? It's a threefold mission: to know God, to love God, and to reach God. Always keeping that in mind will make us alert all the time. So, keeping that mission in mind, we are being advised here by Sri Maharaj Ji to keep God and Guru in our mind at all times. What will happen then is that all our actions will be considered acts of devotion. Acts of devotion. So our welfare, spiritual welfare, lies in keeping God and Guru in mind all the time. Remember the definition of sin, pap. The definition of sin is forgetfulness of God. पाप किसे कहते हैं? हरि विस्मरण, यह है पाप की परिभाषा. To forget God means to sin. To sin means to forget God. At that time, we could be doing something very, very nice for someone. We could be building a charitable hospital. We could be building an orphanage. We could be giving $1 million in charity. But it would not matter if those actions, these charitable acts, those good acts, are not done with God in mind. They're all worldly actions. And they're all sins. It sounds very odd. But how can we think, how can building a hospital be considered a sin? But it is, if that action is done without thinking of God, without dedicating that action to God, without thinking of God at the same time. So this is why it's said, Hari mein Guru mein hi rahe nit rakt tava man pyare. We'll continue. Sadhana karu, sadhana karu, sadhana karu pyare. Sadhana karu, sadhana karu, sadhana karu pyare. Sadhana karu pyare.
साधना करूं करूं प्यारे, साधना करूं प्यारे।
सदा सोचहु जाने कब छिन जाए तनु यह प्यारे। सदा सोचहु जाने कब छिन जाए तनु यह प्यारे। जाए तनु यह प्यारे।
सदा सोचहु जाने कब छिन जाए तनु यह प्यारे। सदा सोचहु जाने कब छिन जाए तनु यह प्यारे। जाए तनु यह प्यारे।
साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं प्यारे।
साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं, साधना करूं, साधना करूं प्यारे। साधना करूं प्यारे।
Next, Shri Maharaj Ji cautions us that always be aware that death may come to you any moment. We always plan on living, we don't plan on dying. One of the maladies that afflicts the intellect, the buddhi, one of the panchaklesh is abhinivesh. Abhinivesh means fear of death. There is a fear of death within us. The fear is perhaps the biggest fear. And it is certainly because we don't understand what death is. Shri Krishna says so beautifully in the Bhagavad Gita, Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirna nyanyani sanyati navani dehi. In the second chapter, Bhagavan Shri Krishna talks about the soul. O Arjun, the soul does not ever die. The body dies, but the soul does not. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakah, na chainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati marutah. The soul, that is who we are, the soul is indestructible. It cannot be killed by weapons. It cannot be burnt by fire. It cannot be melted, moistened by water, and it cannot be withered by the wind. The five elements cannot harm it. Nothing and no one can harm the soul. The soul is eternal. It does not ever die. How much consolation one receives, the person receives who begins to accept himself to be the Atma. The fear starts to disappear. Fear of death starts to disappear. What a freedom that is. Not to be afraid of death, making friends with death, understanding what death is. Again, Shri Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, when the soul leaves the body, what we, the phenomenon called death, death is just like a person changing clothes after a shower or a bath. Just as you change clothes after you take a bath, in the same way, The soul changes bodies. That's it. We don't cry when we change clothes. Oh, I'm so sad, I had to change clothes. I don't know what's going to happen, I'm changing clothes. No, we just easily, without any emotion, without any drama, we change clothes. So why do we have so much drama around death? So much. So much fear. It is only because of not understanding what death is and not accepting the self to be the soul. We never die because we are the Atma. The Atma never dies. It cannot die because it did not take birth. That which takes birth will die one day. Why not accept that fact? A devotee wrote to Sri Maharajji, Maharajji, I'm very afraid, I'm growing very afraid as my parents get older and older. I feel very afraid that they will die one day. Sri Maharajji wrote back to this devotee saying, you must accept already that they're gone. Accept that they're gone already. Accept their death already. Don't accept it after they're gone. You'll have a very difficult time. You know that whoever takes birth will die one day. We have faced death countless times. We have faced the death of our loved ones countless times, but we survived. We made peace with that. But to truly accept it is a different thing altogether. To be free, to be absolutely free from fear, because that is our that's our one and only, our greatest fear, I should say. Our biggest fear. When Yaksh asked Yudhishthir 60 questions, and he said, I will ask 60 questions. If you answer them properly, if you ask them correctly, I will release your brothers, your 4 brothers that I have taken inside the water. Because they wanted to take the water and they did not want to answer my questions, I dragged them inside. So they're with me, but I shall return them if you answer my 60 questions. And one of the questions was, Kimashcharyam. What is the biggest surprise in the world? And Yudhishthir replied wisely, Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti hayyamalayam sheshah sthiratvam icchanti kimashcharyamatah param. Yudhishthir said to Yaksh, the biggest surprise is that although people of the world see their loved ones and their friends and family members and just others, people, we see others dying right before our eyes, or we hear about their demise, but we who remain behind are convinced that we will never die. Even an 80-year-old father who's carrying the body of his son, his 50-year-old son, he's carrying his son's body to the cremation ground, does not think that he will ever die. His son has died, and he was 30 years younger, but the father is not comfortable thinking about his own demise. This is completely illogical. We become very illogical when it comes to death. So illogical that so many people will give some money to a pandit and they will ask him to recite the Mrityunjay jap. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvaruk Miva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiya Mamritat. This mantra is from the Vedas. Why would they have a pandit, a priest, recite this mantra again and again? Because they believe, these people believe, that they can prevent their loved one from dying if this mantra is being repeated. 2 points that I'd like to discuss about this is, first of all, death is already, the moment of death is already determined. No one can elongate their life or cut it short. So that is already determined. If it's meant to happen, it will happen. If it's not meant to happen, that person who was suffering For so many years, 50 years he suffered from this debilitating disease, but he didn't die. He lived for 50 years. Stephen Hawking is a good example of that. For 50 years he lived with ALS, but he died after 50 years. So no one can cut their life short. No one can elongate their life. Even the person who wants to put an end to his life, and he tries, and he succeeds. He succeeds only because it was meant for him to die at that moment. There are many people who try to put an end to their lives. Many times they make an attempt. They make so many attempts, but they survive. And it's amazing that they should survive because they were not meant to die at that point. But when it was meant for them, then they succeeded. So that's the first point. Secondly, what is the true meaning of this mantra? The word mrityu does not mean death in this context. In Om Trayambakam Yajamahe. It means Maya. And the real meaning of this mantra is a beautiful meaning. It's a beautiful meaning. O Bhagwan Shankar, O three-eyed Lord Shankar, release me from the clutches of Maya, Mrityu, Maya. It's a beautiful meaning, but we deliberately or unknowingly misinterpret, and we say, oh, I don't want to die, I don't want my loved ones to die, so here Panditji, please keep reciting this mantra. Or I shall keep reciting this mantra. That is how illogical we are about matters regarding death. We can truly live successfully if we get rid of the fear of death. Then we can live in freedom. Then we will make great use of our time. We will, by being aware of death, but not being afraid of it. Then we will not procrastinate. We will not procrastinate in doing the most important work, and the most important work is practice of devotion. The most important three works are seva, sadhana, satsang. We will not procrastinate once we are aware that we may go any moment. We don't know how long we have to live. We will not grieve our impending doom or our demise whenever it's supposed to happen, but we will be aware of it. I cannot wait to practice devotion because I may not live another day. We will become very, very cautious. We'll become very proactive. Otherwise, we would be like the black bee that got stuck in the lotus flower. There was a bee sitting on the lotus flower, drinking the nectar of the flower, the sweet nectar. And that nectar was so intoxicating that the bee thought, let me enjoy the nectar of this flower. Even as the sun was setting, the bee was not alarmed. Oh, it's okay. I know that the petals of the lotus will close. I'll become entrapped in this flower. But is that a bad thing? No. Because in a few hours, the sun will shine in the sky. The sun's rays will fall on the earth. They will fall on everything and everyone. They will fall on this lotus flower as well. Then the flower will bloom, it will open, and I shall fly away. That was the plan of this bee. Ratrirga mishyati bhavishyati pankaja shrihi. So it was thinking such thoughts, totally unaware that an elephant was making its way to the pond. The elephant was thirsty. The elephant drank water from the pond, and along with the water, it gulped down that lotus. It uprooted the lotus, and along with the water, it took in the lotus flower as well. And the bee was still thinking, while it's going into the stomach of the elephant, it's still thinking, night will pass, morning will come, the sun will shine, and the lotus will bloom once again, I shall fly away. And that's what we are thinking, making so many plans, so many worldly plans, and so many plans to practice devotion as well. I will do devotion, but not at this age. Is this any age to practice devotion? Goodness, I just turned 10. I just entered the double digits. I just turned 10. Is this any age for me? I'm so small. Prahlad was not even 10 when he started practicing devotion. This is not an age for me to practice devotion. I'm a young man. I'm going to sow my wild oats, and then I'll practice devotion when I'm really old. Or now I'm a householder. I've got so many responsibilities. This is not the time for me to practice devotion. I have a growing family. I need to take care of my family. I can't be practicing devotion. Then, okay, now the children are grown up, and they're married also. Well, now I have to take care of my grandchildren. There's no time for devotion. I don't have time. So please, you don't ask me again and again to come to your satsang, to come to your mandir, to come to Yugal Kunj, because I don't have time. We keep on making excuses at every step in life. At every age, we have an excuse. Adi Shankaracharya ji says, a child is too busy, is very busy playing. And when he becomes young, the young man is busy chasing after young ladies. When he is old, he is too busy with his worries. He's just worried all the time. Worried about this one, worried about that one, worried about himself. There's no time. No time to practice devotion. Adi Shankaracharya ji says, rare is the individual who has time for God. Balastavat krida sakta, tarunastavat taruni sakta, vriddhastavat chinta sakta, parabrahmani kopi na sakta. No one has time for God. Rare is the individual who thinks about God, who actually practices devotion. But that individual is not he's an exception to the rule. The rule is that we are too busy. Pani, kera, budbuda, asmanas ki jaat, dekhat hi chip jayenge, jyon tara parbhat. Our life is like a bubble, the life of a bubble that arises in water one moment, only to burst the next. The bubble is born and then it dies. It just arises in water, then it bursts. Where did the bubble go? It doesn't have a long lifespan. It's gone. Such is our life. Our life is like the stars that are seen at night time, and then in a few hours they're gone. Jyon tara parbhat. These are the words of saints. They tell us the truth. They tell us the reality. Because often we live in a la-la land of our imagination. I will always be young, I'll always be healthy. Right now I'm not so healthy, but as I grow older, I'll become healthier. Where's the logic in that? Right now I'm not interested in God, but as soon as I grow old, I will suddenly become very godly. I'll become a devotee all of a sudden. This is what we tend to think. This is what a lot of people tend to think. I often live with different families, so I was living with a family somewhere in the US, and I was at home alone with the grandmother, because everybody went to school or work, and she was there, and she didn't know any English. And she said to me, she asked me, Bitya, can you put on the soap opera for me? And I said, I can, but aapko English nahi aati aapko to. How will you understand it? You don't know English. How about would you like me to put the Ramayana on or Mahabharat? And she said, nahi, mujhe sir dard ho jata hai wo dekhte dekhte. She said, I get a headache when I look at that. And I asked, well, what about the soap operas? She said, they mimic life. Somebody's fighting with another, there's talk of love, there's somebody's crying, somebody's laughing. It's real life. So I identify with that. So even though I don't understand the language, I I'd like to watch that. I prefer that. I prefer the soap operas over Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now, this grandmother was over 80 years of age, but did she suddenly become devoted when she became old, what we call old? No, it doesn't happen like that. Tritiye na tapastaptam chaturthe kim karishyati. If we don't do anything, if we don't do any devotion in the first 3 stages of life, why do we expect that in the 4th and final stage of life we'll become suddenly devoted? It does not happen. Devotion is to become devoted, to become a devotee of God. It's a gradual procession. It's a gradual process, I should say. It's a gradual process. It's not an all of a sudden thing. It's not like we go from the bottom of the staircase right up to the top in one leap. We don't just leap up. We don't fly like Superman or Wonder Woman, and we don't go like that. We go step by step. So it is with devotion. We must do it gradually. We must start at a very young age, keeping in mind that death may claim us at any moment. When we go to the cemetery, do we see that every headstone reads, this was a 95-year-old, this was 89 years old. Now, only old people? Only old people are buried there? No. Young people, children, infants, everyone. Because death does not discriminate. That is a fact. But our abhinivesh, that fear of death, is so much that we don't like to hear about death. We don't like to talk about death. Jagadguru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj, my Gurudev, once when he wanted to move the cot of his own eldest daughter, and he said to a devotee, help me, go on one side, I'll go to the other, we'll move her from here to there. And the devotee said, yes, Maharaji, I can do it myself. Maharaji said, no, you go over there. And as they were taking the cot, the little bed, they were going from here to there, Shri Maharaji started saying, Ram Naam Satya Hai. And the devotee said, Maharaji, Ram Naam Satya Hai. Maharaji said, isn't it true that the name of Ram is true? Isn't that the truth? Yes, but Maharaji, he was taken aback. How can Maharaji say Ram Naam Satya Hai? That's what you say when you take the dead body to the cremation ground. You don't say it to the living, but why not? Shri Maharaji challenged our ways of thinking. He always challenged our ways of thinking. If we are being illogical, and we quite often we are, then he would say, after all, you're a human. Think about this. Why doesn't anyone on the way back from the cremation ground chant Ram Naam Satya Hai? They're all chanting it on the way. Ram Naam Sab Satya Kaha Jabla Jat Masan Lautat Hi Puni Jagat Kaha Satyaman Dhani Gyan. In Bhakti Shatak, Shri Maharaji says, blessed is that knowledge that makes you say Ram Naam Satya Hai on the way to the cremation ground, but which prevents you from saying it on the way back because you are afraid that if you say it on the way back, then someone else may die. It's completely illogical, but that's what happens when we fear something. When we have a fear, we become quite illogical. Sri Maharaji did so much to destroy that fear within us. He just regarded death as something very natural. He would say, the sun rises in the morning and it sets in the evening. You don't cry when the sun sets in the evening. No. It rains in the rainy season. Do you cry about that? No, it's a natural phenomenon. It's cold in the winter season. Do you cry? Are you surprised? It's so cold. It's December. It's supposed to be cold. In very cold places, it snows and there's ice built up. But are you surprised? No, I've been living in Toronto for so many years. It's normal. It's natural. We don't cry, we're not surprised. So why should we be surprised about death? And we must be aware of it. We must not shy away from thinking about it, because that will help us go more towards God and Guru. So Shri Maharaji says, Sada sochahu jane kab chin jaye tanu yah pyare. We continue. हरि तरस दे या न दे तुम रोते जाओ प्यारे हरि तरस दे या न दे तुम रोते जाओ प्यारे तुम रोते जाओ प्यारे रोते जाओ प्यारे हरि दरस दे या न दे तुम रोते जाओ प्यारे तुम रोते जाओ प्यारे साधना करूं साधना करूं साधना करूं प्यारे साधना करूं साधना करूं साधना करूं प्यारे साधना करूं प्यारे हरि दरस दे या न दे तुम रोते जाओ प्यारे. Keep on shedding tears for your beloved Krishna, whether he comes or not. We must never think about Sri Krishna, whether in the sense, we should not think whether he will grace us or not. We must never think that, because he knows exactly what to do. We must do our duty. We must do our work and not be concerned with his. He will grace. He will grace. That is the only thing that God does. The only thing God does is to give grace. We people do many things. We are kind sometimes we are cruel, sometimes we are indifferent. We can do either one of the three. But God is only merciful, only merciful, only merciful. Even when Sri Krishna is killing Kans, he is being merciful. When he is slaying those demons, he is being merciful. When he seems to be angry, when he is showing his anger, he is actually being merciful. The wives of serpent Kaliya prayed to Sri Krishna and they said to him, Krodhopi te nugraha eva sammatah. Maharaj, my lord, even your anger is your grace. You are angry, but in fact you are giving your grace. So everything he does is an indication of his grace. So we don't need to think whether he will grace me or not. All we need to do is to do our work. And we should give him what he likes. What does he like? He doesn't only like, but he loves tears. To each their own. Bhagwan, the Supreme Lord, loves tears. When he sees the devotee crying for him, he is extremely moved and he comes to that devotee if the tears are genuine. If the tears are not being shed for the world. Someone is sitting in the mandir and crying and crying. Why are you crying? I don't have a job, that's why I'm crying. Not those kind of tears. My loved one is very, very sick, that's why I'm crying in front of God. That's not what I'm talking about. Tears for God. When will I see you? When will I be able to feed you with my own hands? When will I put a garland of flowers around your neck? When will you come out of that murti? When will I see you? You coming out of the murti, not just the murti. You are inside that murti. I cannot see you. When will you come? When will I be able to see you? That desperation, tears of desperation, tears of love, tears of longing. And if nothing else, then tears of repentance, that why am I not able to cry? Why don't I cry for God? Why am I such a sinful soul that my eyes are always dry as I go into the mandir, as I sing kirtans and bhajans? Why? And then tears of repentance will come at least. Tears of gratitude. Any which way, tears must come into the eyes. Not for the world, but for Him. Sometimes we shed tears for God, yes we do, but we shed tears for the world also. So, Sri Maharaji used to say, you are all rounders. You're like the fly that sits on the image of God, and then it sits on waste matter and a scab or a wound. The fly does not discriminate. Sometimes we cry for God, and sometimes we cry for the world. Both the same. Shri Maharaj used to say, कभी भगवान के लिए, गुरु जा रहे हैं घर से, हमारे घर गुरुदेव आए, उनके लिए आंसू बहा दिए, दो आंसू उनके लिए बहा दिए, बेटी को विदा कर रहे हैं, बेटी की विदाई में 2 आंसू बहा दिए. दोनों एक ही समान है. So we are shedding tears for God with His grace, with our Guru's grace, and then we shed tears for the world also. That's like a fly. Sri Maharaji used to say, become like the bee that sits only on flowers. Only on flowers. Shed tears only for God and Guru, not for the world. Because when we shed tears for the world is impure. So impurities enter our mind, and the heart becomes even more impure. When we shed tears for God and Guru, they are supremely pure. So the impurities of our heart start to flow out along with the tears. We get rid of some of those sins, sinful tendencies also, when we shed tears for God and Guru. That is why saints such as Meera and Kabir Das ji, they have emphasized tears. Gauranga Mahaprabhu, who was Radha and Krishna both in one form 500 years ago, he emphasized tears. Nayanam galada shrudharaya vadanam gadgadaruddhaya gira pulakair nichitam vapuhkada tavanamagrahane bhavishyati ashtapadi. O Krishna, when will the day come? When will the blissful day come? When? There will be tears flowing from my eyes. And when my throat, there will be lump in my throat, I would not be able to chant your name properly. When will I get goosebumps on my skin thinking of you? So Gauranga Mahaprabhu emphasized tears. Sri Maharaji most certainly emphasized tears. He would say, if you don't shed tears for God, that means you have not started practicing devotion. You have not even started practicing devotion, he used to say, if you are not shedding tears. He used to say, don't think that in the advanced stages of devotional practice you will then shed tears. No, you have to shed tears right in the beginning. Even a novice has to shed tears. Don't wait till you get to the advanced stages. How will you go to the advanced stages if you're not crying in the initial stages, in the novice stage? Mirabai has said, Ansuvan jal siinch prem bel boi. I have nurtured the vine of love with water of my eyes, with my tears. Ab to bel phail gayi anand phal hoy. She said, now the vine of love is it's spread, and I'm getting a fruit called anand, unlimited happiness from it. It all happened because of shedding tears for God. Kabira hasna dur kar, रोने से कर प्रीत बिनु रोए किन पाइया प्रेम प्यारो मीत. These are Kabir Das Ji's words in Guru Granth Sahib. Kabir Das Ji says, no one can attain God without shedding tears. So, O sadhak, cry for God. Ramakrishna Paramhans used to say, People shed buckets and buckets of tears for the world, but who really cries for God? Again, a rare soul. Rare is the soul who cries for God. So tears are essential in the practice of devotion. We will continue tomorrow. Boliye Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki Jai. Srimad Sadguru Sarkar ki Jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Jai Shri Radhe.